My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 38 years old, and I'm a property developer. Just a few months ago, I was standing in the gleaming lobby of the Zenith Tower, my calves already burning, watching my so-called team ascend in a private express elevator, their backs to me, their shoulders shaking with barely suppressed laughter. They'd just told me the only working lift was the service elevator, and even that was temperamental above the 30th floor. Our crucial client presentation was on the 65th floor, meaning I was facing a very long, very public climb. I felt the heat rise in my face, a mix of exhaustion and a simmering rage I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge before. Mark, the senior project manager, had given me a sympathetic shrug that didn't reach his eyes. "Looks like you'll get your steps in, Eleanor," he'd chirped, just before the door slid shut. They thought it was a hilarious inconvenience, a minor humiliation for the new girl. What they didn't know, couldn't possibly have imagined, was that the building they were so casually ascending, the very ground beneath their feet, belonged to me. And their little joke was about to cost them a lot more than just a few minutes of their time. To understand why I was in that lobby, dressed in a sharp but now wrinkled suit, about to embark on an involuntary marathon, you need to know a bit about Vance Holdings. My grandfather, Arthur Vance, built a real estate empire from the ground up. When he passed away unexpectedly 6 months prior, I inherited the lion's share of it. It was a massive portfolio, including residential, commercial, and mixed-use properties across the country. The Zenith Tower, a sleek, 65-story skyscraper in downtown Chicago, was one of his most recent and ambitious acquisitions. Grandpa Arthur had always believed in understanding a business from the ground up, not just from a boardroom. He'd often gone undercover himself. So, when I took over, I decided to do the same with the Zenith. I wanted to assess the existing management and project teams without the bias that would come from being the owner. I introduced myself as Eleanor Vance, a senior project manager brought in by Vance Holdings to oversee the integration of new properties into our portfolio. My cover was that I was here to learn the ropes of this specific building's operations, working alongside the existing team. My immediate team consisted of Mark Jensen, the current senior project manager, Sarah Chen, and David Miller, both project managers. Mark, a man in his late 40s with a perpetually slicked-back hairstyle and an air of self-importance, had been with the building for years. He'd clearly expected to be promoted to a more senior role within Vance Holdings after the acquisition, and my arrival, even as a senior PM, felt like a direct threat to his perceived authority and ambition. Sarah and David, younger and more impressionable, seemed to take their cues from Mark, falling in line with his subtly hostile attitude. From day one, the dynamic was off. Mark would forget to include me in crucial email threads, then subtly criticize me for being out of the loop. He'd delegate the most tedious data entry or the least glamorous site visits to me, always with a patronizing smile. "Eleanor, with your fresh eyes, I'm sure you can spot the discrepancies in these historical maintenance reports," he'd say, handing me a stack of dusty binders that would take days to sift through. I'd silently pore over them, noticing not just discrepancies but patterns of neglect and inflated invoices that would later prove very useful. A few weeks in, a more significant incident occurred. I was tasked with preparing a detailed financial projection for a potential new tenant, a process that involved accessing sensitive building data. I spent 3 full days compiling the report, saving it meticulously on the shared server. The morning it was due, the file was gone. "Server error, probably," Mark had said, shrugging. "Happens all the time. Good thing you keep backups, right?" He knew perfectly well that due to the sensitive nature of the data, I was not allowed to store it locally on my laptop. I had to pull an all-nighter, recreating the entire report from scratch, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a growing suspicion. That detail mattered later. The Zenith Tower was a point of pride for my grandfather, a symbol of his vision. He'd personally overseen the installation of its state-of-the-art express elevators, which could whisk you from the lobby to the 65th floor in under a minute. They were a marvel of engineering, rarely experiencing issues. So when Mark announced, with a smirk, that technical difficulties had rendered the express elevators unusable for our 10 a.m. client meeting on the penthouse floor, I raised an eyebrow. "All of them?" I asked, looking at the bank of 6 sleek doors. "Just the main bank, for now," he said. Maintenance is working on it. You can take the service elevator. But it's a bit of a maze. I arrived at the lobby a few minutes before the meeting, carrying my presentation materials. Mark, Sarah, and David were already there, chatting animatedly near a discreet side door I hadn't noticed before. As I approached, Mark caught my eye. "Oh, Eleanor, good. We were just about to head up. The service elevator is around the corner, third door on the left. It's slow, but it'll get you there eventually. We'll try to hold things until you arrive." He gestured vaguely towards the service entrance. As he spoke, he pressed a button on a hidden panel next to the side door. A single, gleaming express elevator car, one from the main bank he'd just declared non-functional, silently opened for them. Sarah and David gave me quick, almost apologetic glances, but followed Mark inside without a word. As the doors began to close, Mark leaned out, a triumphant glint in his eye. "Don't want to keep the client waiting, do we?" he said, his voice dripping with false concern. Then the doors closed, and they were gone. I stood there, rooted to the spot, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. They had lied, used a private access code, and intentionally left me behind, knowing I'd be forced to take the long way up, or worse, miss the presentation entirely. My immediate reaction was a cold, quiet fury. My hands tightened on my briefcase, but I simply turned and walked towards the service entrance, my jaw clenched. The service elevator was indeed slow, stopping on what felt like every other floor, laden with cleaning supplies and catering carts. By the time it reached the 30th floor, it shuddered to a halt, the lights flickering. A tinny voice announced, "Elevator temporarily out of service. Please use stairs." I stared at the message, then at the digital floor counter, 30. 65 minus 30, 35 floors to go. I took a deep breath, adjusted my grip on my briefcase, and pushed open the heavy fire escape door. The stairwell was dim, smelling faintly of dust and disinfectant. Each step up was a testament to their malice. With every floor I climbed, the image of Mark's smug face became clearer, and my resolve hardened. I reached the 65th floor, breathless and sweating, my suit clinging uncomfortably. I smoothed my hair, took a moment to compose myself, and walked into the penthouse reception area. Mark was already mid-sentence, gesturing expansively. He paused, clearly surprised to see me, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "Ah, Eleanor," he said, recovering quickly. "Glad you could make it. We were just about to start." I nodded curtly, walked to the conference table, and took my seat, my eyes meeting his for a brief, loaded moment. The presentation, surprisingly, went well. I delivered my sections flawlessly, despite the burning in my legs, and the client seemed impressed. But my mind was already racing, connecting the dots. That evening, I didn't go home. I went to the building management office, which, as owner, I had full access to. I logged into the building's internal systems. First, I pulled the security footage from the lobby for that morning. It clearly showed Mark, Sarah, and David congregating near the hidden panel, Mark punching in a code, and the express elevator opening for them while I was still approaching. Then, I accessed the elevator maintenance logs. There was a brief, 15-minute system reset noted for the main express bank, but it had been completed well before our meeting time. The out-of-order sign they'd put up was a lie. And the service elevator's malfunction on the 30th floor? A quick check of its logs showed no such incident. It had been manually stopped and reset from a remote panel, a panel accessible only to senior building staff, or someone with a keycard override. What I didn't understand yet was the extent of their coordinated effort. I pulled up the internal communications logs. There were several text messages between Mark and the building's head of maintenance, Gary, sent just minutes before our meeting. One read, "Eleanor is running late. Make sure the main bank is unavailable for her. We'll use 3. Another, a few minutes later, "Get the service lift to stop around 30. She needs to understand." It wasn't just Mark. He had brought a complicit staff member into his scheme. The file deletion, the forgotten emails, the deliberately difficult tasks, It all coalesced into a clear pattern of targeted harassment and sabotage. They weren't just undermining me, they were actively trying to force me out. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. I called my personal attorney, David Thorne, a sharp corporate lawyer who had worked with my grandfather for years, and explained the situation. He advised me to proceed with caution but assured me I had ample grounds for termination. Then, I sent an email to Mark, Sarah, and David, scheduling an urgent meeting for 9 a.m. in the main conference room. The subject line was simply, Urgent Meeting, Project Zenith. I also sent a separate, encrypted email to Gary, the head of maintenance, requesting his presence. At precisely 9 a.m., they all walked in, looking slightly confused. Mark still wore his usual air of condescension. "What's this about, Eleanor?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Another one of your urgent reports?" I didn't respond. Instead, I walked to the head of the table, placed my briefcase down, and pulled out a small, heavy brass key. It was the master key to the entire building, engraved with the Vance Holdings logo. I laid it on the polished wood. "Before we begin," I said, my voice calm, "I need to clarify something. My name isn't just Eleanor Vance, Senior Project Manager." I paused, letting the silence hang heavy. "My name is Eleanor Vance. And I am the owner of Vance Holdings, and by extension, this building." The color drained from Mark's face. Sarah gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. David just stared, his eyes wide with disbelief. Gary, who had looked uncomfortable from the moment he walked in, visibly flinched. "I've been here for the past few months, observing," I continued, my gaze sweeping across their stunned faces. "Observing your work, your dedication, and your treatment of a colleague you believed to be beneath you." I then systematically laid out the evidence, the security footage of them taking the private elevator, the falsified maintenance logs, Gary's text messages confirming the deliberate elevator stoppage, the missing financial report, the pattern of exclusion from emails and meetings. I had printouts, screenshots, and notarized affidavits from other building staff who had witnessed their behavior, too afraid to speak up before. Mark stammered, This is a misunderstanding, Eleanor. We were just having a bit of fun. A prank." Sarah started to cry softly. David tried to protest, "I just followed orders." I held up a hand, cutting them off. "This wasn't a prank, Mark. This was a calculated, sustained effort to sabotage my work, undermine my authority, and ultimately, force me out of a company I own. You deliberately made me walk 65 floors, thinking it would humiliate me. It only solidified my decision." I looked directly at Mark. "Mark Jensen, your employment with Vance Holdings is terminated, effective immediately. Your access will be revoked, and you will be escorted from the premises." His face contorted, a mixture of fury and absolute terror. "You can't do this," he spluttered. "I've been here for 15 years. "I can," I replied, my voice unwavering. "And I just did." I then turned to Gary. "Gary, your actions represent a severe breach of trust and professional conduct. You are suspended indefinitely, pending a full internal investigation. Depending on its findings, further action, including termination, will be taken. For Sarah and David, I offered a final warning. Your complicity, even if passive, is unacceptable. This is your chance to prove you can be valuable, trustworthy members of this team. Any further instances of this behavior, and you will follow Mark out the door." The aftermath was swift and decisive. Mark was escorted out by security, his briefcase clutched tightly, his face a mask of disbelief. Gary was placed on administrative leave, and a full audit of the maintenance department began. Sarah and David, chastened and clearly terrified, became remarkably efficient and cooperative. The atmosphere in the office shifted overnight. The building staff, who had known about Mark's bullying for years, breathed a collective sigh of relief. Some even approached me privately, expressing their gratitude and offering their support. I spent the next few weeks restructuring the project management division, bringing in new talent and promoting those who had shown genuine dedication and integrity. I made it clear that a culture of respect and collaboration was non-negotiable. I stopped going undercover, embracing my role as owner and CEO. The view from the 65th floor penthouse, which I now used as my primary office, was breathtaking. It was a clear panorama of the city, a testament to what could be built with vision and hard work. Sometimes, I still think about that climb, the burning in my calves, the stale air of the stairwell. But now, when I step into one of the Zenith's express elevators, I don't just see a mode of transport. I see a symbol of trust, access, and the respect that must be earned, not just demanded. And as the doors glide silently open, whisking me effortlessly to the top, I know that for the first time in a long time, I am exactly where I belong.